Jets and the Bills at 4:25. Final game ever at the old Ralph Wilson Stadium. Jets at 3-13. If they lose, they're guaranteed the number 3 pick. Obviously, some things that would have to happen in front of them for them to move up. They also own the Colts pick in round 1, which is right now sitting at number 18. It could potentially go as high as number 15 by the end of the day. Mike, you look at this Jets team, and they are on the precipice of history today. If they go through today without an interception, since the NFL started recording INTs in 1933, no team has ever finished a season without a pick, so the Jets would be the first to do so if they don't get one today. Josh Allen expected to start, but maybe not finish the game. Mitch Trubisky is the backup. Do the Jets make history today? Do they go through an entire 17-game regular season without an INT?
With Mitch Trubisky, they got a puncher's chance. They got a puncher's chance, so it'll be interesting.
How can you explain that stat, Mike? Like, it's mind-boggling to me that it started off as a running bet, 7 games, 8 games, but 16 games, which forever was a full season, and here we are, game 17 without a pick.
Yeah, look, I've been around the sport for a while. Look, some of it obviously is scheme. They've made some changes. Some of it's luck. Look at that McCaffrey interception last night. If that play was run 100 times, 99 of it would have been a completion or an incompletion. The fact that Thomas was able to intercept that ball off of McCaffrey, that never happens, ever. So part of it is luck. Part of it, obviously, was scheme. It's just, obviously, a very unusual statistic.
It's hard to believe, and they don't even come close. And, the next closest teams all have at least 7 interceptions. The 2020 Jets, which was the worst team that I've ever seen, they finished 2-14, and obviously they weren't still bad enough to even get the number 1 pick that year because, of course, but they had 6 interceptions that year. So it's inexplainable. And, I mean, Aaron Glenn had 41 interceptions as a player. He was a phenomenal Pro Bowl corner. He was a ball hawk. That was his reputation. It really is just mind-boggling that we're here, and the Jets are being laughed at for a stat that I don't think will ever be broken if they don't get a pick today. I doubt this ever happens again, at least in our lifetime, that a team will go through an entire season without an interception.
Yeah, yep, probably. But look, of all the things they got to work on, that's just one of many.
Let's start with that then, right? All signs point to Aaron Glenn being retained. If you're Aaron Glenn and you're assessing year 1, what are the things that you're obviously going to be looking to figure out and get right going into a year where the perception is, fair or not, he's going to be on the hot seat going into year 2?
Yeah. Well, look, here's the most important thing, and I know, a lot of the people we talk about, I've worked with and I know them intimately. No one will be harder on Aaron Glenn, including yourself, than Aaron Glenn. He is the most driven, serious person you can meet. And whether he lets the media in on that side of his personality or not, I don't know. Again, I don't care. I just know the truth, which is he is a really smart, thoughtful, driven, holds people accountable person. And that's the exact sort of attributes you want in a head coach. And that's why, my hope and belief is, we'll see a much better product next year. And I think one of the things you really have to say to yourself is where did we go wrong, and really just do an autopsy. And I'm sure him and Darren Mucci will do that on everything, how we onboarded people, how we hired people, who we selected, why we selected, and then, just bring it down to the studs and build from there. But I do think, as I mentioned last hour, Jake, there are foundational pieces, starting with bookend, young, really good tackles. And if you don't have that, to me, it's really hard to have a chance. So, from there, obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the quarterback and the defensive coordinator.
So I'm with you with the offensive line, but that to me is why this year is so alarming. The fact that you've actually had the same 5 starters for all 17 games line up, and it has looked this poor. The offense is this bad. The passing offense has been inept outside of the outlier performance in week 1 and then whatever week that Bengals game was. I think it was week 8. It's just it's tough to stomach, Mike. Again, we didn't have the highest of expectations for the Jets this year, but you were higher on them than I certainly was when we made our predictions at the beginning of the year. It's just tough to sit here and feel good about anything. Yes, they have the resources to improve the team, but they're going to have a brand-new defensive staff. The DC hire could not have been any worse. There's reports that if Glenn is retained, and it sounds like he will be, they're going to make a ton of changes to the offensive staff. So what exactly was accomplished this year? What foundation was exactly laid out when you're starting year 1 3-14? And you said something a few weeks ago that stuck with me. You don't ever like to bet on outliers. Well, here's just a damning stat. of coaches who started 0-6 or worse, only 4 of the last 17 of those coaches who were 0-6 or worse actually were able to get their team to the playoffs during their tenure. So I've seen nothing that tells me this is going to work out. You obviously know Aaron Glenn way better than I do, but I have nothing I could grasp onto that makes me feel good about this head coach.
Yeah, well, yeah, I see it totally differently. And I would say this, like, if, let's say, halfway through the season, let's talk about the inverse here for a second to make my point. They went out and signed Derek Carr or Ryan Fitzpatrick the way the Colts went out and signed Phillip Rivers. They probably win 3 or 4 more games. And at the end of
But the Colts didn't win a game with Phillip Rivers.
Well, let me finish.
Go ahead.
So my point is, if the Jets had won a couple more games this year, right, call it 4, 5, or 6, this is like the 1 year, Jake. It really doesn't matter how many games they won. And knowing this fan base and people like yourself, like, if they had won 5 or 6 games, the argument would have been like, why did we do that? Why did we tear it down to the studs? Why didn't we trade Sauce Gardner? Why didn't we trade Quinnen Williams? Why didn't we load up with cap space and draft choices? Because the worse we are this year, the better we'll be in the future. That's actually what they did. They actually brought it down to the studs. Like, once they traded those players, like, to me, the expectations for the win-loss record for this year, again, was totally irrelevant. And does he have to make better hires? Absolutely. I totally agree with that. But where I give them a lot of credit is I think they're trying to do it the right way, not the easy way. And they didn't go out and add a lot of veterans where they're going to take a step back where a lot of these guys got hurt. And I'll be specific. Look at the Commanders, right? Commanders had a great first year. They got really old really quickly. Frankly, Louvu, Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler, those guys got hurt. And now they're like starting from scratch in year 3. Obviously, if Jaden Daniels comes back, that's a big difference. All my point is, like, I actually think they're doing this the right way. Do I wish there were a couple of timeouts that were handled differently? Of course. Do I wish the coordinator was different? Of course. But I do think they're taking the long, sober view. And I think as someone who likes the team as much as you do, Jake, you should appreciate that because they're not trying to do this with a Band-Aid.
So a couple things, right? They started 0-7, though, Mike, with those players you talk about, like tearing it down to the studs. Again, we lauded this defense coming into the year that had 8 of its 11 starters back, that they had a defensive head coach, that they had an experienced DC. The expectation was that the Jet defense was not going to get off to the worst start in points allowed in franchise history. Then you follow that up with you were lauding them, and we were giving fair credit to Aaron Glenn and the staff, that they won 3 of 5 after that 0-7 start, that even after the trades, they were looking a lot more competent. So now for you to say that, the wins candidly don't matter, they do matter. We wanted to see competency. I was rooting for wins.
So you want wins? So Jake, so I want to get this that. So you're saying from a Jet perspective, you'd rather be picking 14th than like 3rd or 4th.
That's not what I'm saying now at this point. But when we were doing the shows together and we were giving the Jets credit and you were picking them to beat the Dolphins and you were picking them to win all these games, it was because we thought we were seeing improvement. And we haven't seen that. And Aaron Glenn questioned their effort after the game last week against New England, and then he walked it back. I think the expectation, Mike, is obviously we can make a case that losing and getting a better draft pick is better for this team. But isn't it fair to have a Jets team that didn't just set the record for the worst December in NFL history? Like that, again, he was asked for his positives this week. One of the things he brought up was they haven't had any field goals blocked. Like when 0 blocked field goals makes the short list of positives from the season, that tells you everything you need to know about where things actually stand this year. This has been one of the worst Jet teams ever. Rich Cimini, who will join us coming up in about 15 minutes, says it's the 3rd worst team he's ever covered since he's been covering the Jets. Like that's what we're talking about here, Mike.
Right. And if he was hired on a 1-year deal, like I would be as concerned as you are. But like this is, what's funny is like, let's say the Jets fire Aaron Glenn. The whole story next week would be like, wow, Jets totally reactionary. Wow, the Jets can't, stick to a long-term plan. Wow, the Jets don't have the mental toughness of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens who hire a coach, believe in him, and let him get better. I work with Bill Parcells. He told me, Jake, firsthand, he was terrible his first year at the Giants. The late George Young, the general manager of the Giants, tried to hire Howard Schnellenberger and fire Bill Parcells after his first year. And his agent told him, look, they're trying to hire Schnellenberger. If they hire him, you're out after year 1. Well, Schnellenberger changed his mind. He didn't take the job. And how did that turn out? And I'm not saying Aaron Glenn's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. I'm also saying that he won't be. All my point is, like, for all the angst about, like, hey, this organization keeps making changes, there's no stability, there's no credibility, like, Aaron Glenn was a very sought-after candidate last year who had multiple opportunities with multiple teams, and those traits don't go away overnight. And what you look at is you say you invest in a person, you believe in him, let him grow, let him make mistakes. He'll make more mistakes, by the way, Jake. I promise you that. But, again, I'm betting on the person and the character and the long-term view that this organization has, which is great because for a long time it was like, we're going to Band-Aid this, we're going to keep the head coach, we're going to fire the GM. And, I give the organization credit because they tore it down to the studs, and hopefully they'll look at this year as the foundational year.
But here's the pushback on that, Mike. You say you don't like betting on outliers, right? I mean, this season, Aaron Glenn became the 29th first-time NFL head coach in the last 25 years, 0-1 this year, to win 4 or fewer games in his first season. Only 8 of the previous 28 even had a winning season. Only 5 had a winning season and actually made the postseason. And one of them is Zach Taylor, who's got a Hall of Fame quarterback with Joe Burrow. So we're betting on an outlier here. And to your point, look, the Jets, you could say a lot of things about Woody Johnson. He's not known to have been impatient in the past. Robert Saleh was in his 4th year when he fired him. Joe Douglas was in year 6 of a 6-year contract. Todd Bowles got 4 years, right? Rex Ryan was in year 6. Eric Mangini was in year 3. Herm Edwards was there from 01 to 05. So, again, if they moved on from Glenn, to me it would be justified. That's how bad this has been, Mike. I mean, if you look at the uncompetitiveness when they were trying to win and the glaring coaching mistakes, Aaron Glenn came out and said this will be a team Jet fans are proud of. Then he walked that back. He also said the last 4 minutes of each half belonged to the head coach. They've been an abomination in the last 4 minutes of each half this year. You look at the clock management stuff, with that all you could bring up. But how about the score in the first half of games this year when he said that they'd come out and be prepared? Tampa Bay down 20-6, Dallas down 23-3, Buffalo in week 2 down 20-3, Miami down 24-7, Jacksonville down 21-7. Last week 35-3 and 42-3 after 3 quarters. You can't sell me on any sort of foundation being laid when this year is as big of an abject failure as we've seen. If you just look at I know you're an analytics guy, right? So I pulled this up. If you just look at simple metrics, right, like SRS, which is simple rating system, which is point differential adjusted based on strength of schedule. Not only are the Jets 32nd this year compared to every other team, which is the worst, it's the second worst in franchise history, ahead of only the 1976 team. It's also worse than all 8 head coaches that have been one and done since 2018. So, again, I'm rooting for Aaron Glenn because I'm a Jet fan, but I got to call a spade a spade. This has been an abject disaster in year 1.
Yeah, and that's what it's year 1. That's exactly what it is. So, again, to me, if you were looking for success or failure in 2025, you could have gone out and signed a couple veteran quarterbacks like a Derek Carr.
But they did that. They gave $30 million to Justin Fields guaranteed. They had Tyrod Taylor as their backup quarterback.
Okay.
But they still started 0-7.
Right. But Justin Fields, look, obviously that's a sign that didn't work out. And I know it sounds crazy to say $30 million isn't a lot, but that signing is not going to impede progress relative to next year, whatever they decide to do at quarterback, be it Malik Willis or Dante Moore. That's not. They didn't put their eggs in a veteran basket to say, this is the guy we're going with. And look, we could have said they could have signed a better bridge quarterback, obviously. But all my point is, when we look back in a year or two, and I know, we're sort of, in the moment here, it doesn't matter if you win 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't. And when everything fell apart between Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields, one because of ability, one because of injury, what I do, and it's hard short term, and I can't disagree with your statistics, but they could have said, we're going to see what we have in Brady Cook, much the way we're seeing the Dolphins say, hey, let's see what we have with Quinn Ewers versus going out and trying to get a veteran. And that's where this record could be misleading. Now, we'll know a lot more next year, obviously, Jake, but all I'm saying is in year 1, the record isn't as important as trying to get the foundation in place. And look, we could argue about how much of the foundation is there. To me, the offensive line, if you're saying, if I'm a Jet fan, what am I excited about? I'm excited about the offensive line, Garrett Wilson. You may have A.D. Mitchell. You may have John Mechie, who are contributing players. The defense was obviously a disappointment. You could say part of it was on coaching, part of it was on evaluation. I wouldn't walk away from guys like Will McDonald. I wouldn't walk away from guys like Jermaine Johnson because I think when they're playing at their best, they have some good young pass rushers. So is the cupboard full? No, but I don't think it's as bare as you're saying it is.
He's Mike Tannenbaum. My name is Jake Asman. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Get to your calls as well. Rich Cimini will join us. Keep it right here. We're talking Jets as they take on the Bills in the last game of their season coming up at 4:25. It's New York Game Day, 880 ESPN New York and the ESPN New York app. Responsibly, Rich Cimini will join us coming up in a couple of minutes, 800-919-3776. Let's say hello to PBM, Purple Belt Mike in New York City, who is up first this segment with Mike Tannenbaum and Jake Asman. What's up, Mike?
What's up? I just have a couple questions here. So no one would argue that Gerard Mayo didn't deserve to get fired, but the Jets are on pace to have 100 points worse differential than him, and they set the record for the worst point differential in the entire month. Losing 2 players on defense shouldn't excuse the Jets to have 10 points on offense for the season, and how every single player has really regressed. Will McDonald has gotten worse. Jermaine Johnson has gotten worse. Our linebackers, Quincy and our MVP from last year, has gotten worse. When our MVP is a special teams player that was cut, it's very, very alarming. And certain coaches have had one and done and been better, and some have done twice. The 49ers had 2 years in a row they cut a guy, and they landed on Kyle Shanahan because it was very clear that the guys that they had in there were not the guys. And the same thing, I think, with the Texans, and then they landed on their guys. So, just looking at the facts and what's here, nothing historically has pointed to him deserving his job. And people talk about, Dan Campbell this, Dan Campbell that. Dan Campbell's point differential was less than 50. He lost games by less than a touchdown, by field goals. The team got better, and they were competitive in December. We're getting blown out. Losing 2 players should not mean that the entire thing explodes. And for the most part, certain players haven't been there. So I don't understand. I just want some clarification here because, to me, Aaron Glenn needs to go because he's just not a good coach.
Mike, appreciate the call. Mike T, I'll give you some one-and-done coach stats. So since 2018, here are the coaches that have been one-and-done and what's happened after them. Freddie Kitchens, he's fired. He was replaced by Kevin Stefanski. He's been to the playoffs twice, 2-time Coach of the Year. Nathaniel Hackett led to Sean Payton. David Culley and Lovie Smith, I was doing afternoon radio at that time. That ends up one and done back-to-back seasons. That leads to DeMeco Ryans. They've obviously been to the playoffs now 3 straight years. Frank Reich, he was fired. That leaves to Dave Canales. We'll see what happens today, whether or not Carolina will make the playoffs based on what happens in that Falcons and Saints game. Urban Meyer led to Doug Peterson. He made the postseason in his first year out there. Steve Wilkes, he was fired in 2018 after just 1 season in Arizona. That led to Cliff Kingsbury, who over his 4 years, he did make the playoffs, I think, in that second season in Arizona. Again, that's kind of what Aaron Glenn is stepping into if he's retained, Mike, because that's how bad this year has been. The expectations were low. The Jets' win total was 6.5 at all the sports books. I don't think anyone foresaw not having a pick through 16 games, the issues they've had year-round or all season round with the in-game stuff, how bad the offense has looked. Again, Aaron Glenn was asked for positives. One of the things he highlighted was the fact they haven't had a field goal blocked this year. It just feels like we're grasping at straws for anything.
Yeah, and like I said, if we were evaluating, a coach based on 1 year, you would typically hire coaches that have been in that seat before, because being a head coach there's a massive learning curve. I could tell you that I was the assistant GM of the New York Jets for 5 years, and when I became the GM, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I think when you talk to coaches candidly, either on or off the record, they will say the same thing relative to, we could talk about Dan Campbell. Dan's a guy I hired in Miami. He went 5-7 when he was our interim coach. He had 2 years to get ready to replace, ironically, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, and halfway through the first year, he had to basically fire John Morton. So here's one of arguably the best coaches in our game, made a mistake with somebody that he was around every day. So all my point is, this to me is a year that you're investing in the future, and some of the things aren't going to be in the one-loss record from a culture standpoint, from a player accountability standpoint. And I do think there's more foundation there, than you do. Again,
Who are the foundation pieces, though? You have the offensive line.
Which are 5 critical pieces, right? You have what should be two really good young pass rushers, Jermaine Johnson.
But they've had terrible seasons, though, Mike. That doesn't concern you at all? That these guys were proven to be good players with the previous staff, and they've been terrible this year. And I'm a huge Jermaine Johnson fan, and I've been so disappointed with what we've seen from him. He's supposed to be one of the leaders on the team, and he was scoffing at a question when they asked him last week after the game about Aaron Glenn questioning their effort.
Yeah, and so, but that's why you have coaching. Like, those guys can get better. Like, you look at their ceilings, you look at their ability, you look at their age. Again,
but isn't that Aaron Glenn's job, right? Is that fair to say? He's the defensive head coach. Their defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and it's the worst in franchise history in so many metrics.
Yeah, but again, if you bring in a different coordinator, it should get better.
But what does Aaron Glenn do? Isn't he supposed to be, like, overseeing that, being a part of that?
Yeah, no question. Ultimately, he's responsible for everything. But you're saying, what are the foundational pieces? I'm saying, like, when those guys are playing well, like, those guys are foundational pieces, and they have to play better. They're going to need to play better. And again, Aaron Glenn would agree with you. And I think what he probably is going to look at is a different defensive coordinator, one that he has more alignment with, and one that should get more out of these players. So, but I'm just telling you from a GM perspective, it is hard to find pass rushers. It is really hard to find offensive linemen. Look at the Falcons. The Falcons drafted Jalen Walker and they gave up a first-round pick that could be a top 10 pick to get James Pierce, who had some real questionable character issues. That's how hard it is to find pass rushers. So to me, the fact that they didn't play well isn't great, but at least you know that they have the ability, and you hope that the right coach will get it out of them.
Ryan in Bayonne is up next before we say hello to Rich Cimini in his weekly spot. Ryan, thanks for making the call. You're on New York Game Day with Jake Asman and Mike Tannenbaum.
Jake, what's going on? Great job today. I just have a quick question for Mike. You're ready to give up on Dart when he's obviously shown flashes of a really good quarterback for the Giants who haven't had one in years, but you're willing to give Aaron Glenn another shot when he showed nothing. Can you please make that make sense for me? Thank you.
Yeah, no one ever said I was giving up on Dart. In fact, I've been on the record to say I think Jackson Dart has a chance to be a good quarterback, maybe a B+. There are concerns about his development. What I'm saying is the best analogy I could give you is Matt Stafford and Jared Goff. The L.A. Rams gave Jared Goff over $100 million in guaranteed money, and 15 months later, Sean McVay walked into Stan Kroenke's office, the owner of the Rams, and said, hey, I know we just gave $100 million to Jared Goff, but we have an opportunity to get better in Matt Stafford. That turned out to be the right decision. My point is, like, I'm not giving up on Jackson Dart, but if an unexpected opportunity to get somebody better, that's when you have to take advantage of that. That's what good companies do.
We'll stay with the Jet conversation right now. We'll say hello to the great Rich Cimini, ESPN Jets reporter, host of the Flight Deck podcast. Rich, always appreciate your time. One game to go. Thanks, of course, for hopping on New York Game Day with us.
Yeah, it's been quite the year. We haven't had a lot of positive things to talk about this year, but I can't say we're going to have a lot of positive things to say during this conversation either. But
what are you talking about? Jake's talking about giving Aaron Glenn an extension. Jake is being very honest, sober, taking the long view of things, not trying to be reactionary. Rational. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about, Rich.
0 field goals blocked this year, Rich. I'm making the shirts. We're going to hang the banner. The 2025 Jets field goal protection champions. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is it. That is an accomplishment. I mean, in the league this year, the block kicks are way up around the league. The Jets are one of 11 teams that haven't had a PAT or a field goal block. So, hey, when you don't have a lot of positives, you gotta trumpet the ones you have.
So, Rich, let me ask you this: you've been around the team all year. Obviously, the record isn't anywhere close to where we all thought or hoped to expect it would be. What do you see that would give you reasons to be encouraged, and what are your biggest concerns?
Well, I don't think we have enough time to go through all the concerns, but I'll start with the positives. I mean, it's all about the future. It's the draft capital, the 2 1s this year, the 3 1s next year, and then you just have to have faith that Muji and Glenn can use those picks wisely. They'll probably have about $70 million in cap room this year. That could change based on where they set the cap, but it's going to be a lot. They don't have a lot of guaranteed money invested in players in future years, so there's going to be a lot of roster movement, a lot of roster flexibility. Those are the positives. It's really coming out of this season. I would say the offensive line was a positive. They're going to start the same 5 guys for 17 games. That's quite an accomplishment, in this league. The only team to do that. I think they have 3 players on the line or 4 if you count AVT. He's been injured, that you can build around. So certainly you have 2 offensive tackles. Membu showed a lot of promise this year. Those are positives. Defensively, I can't point to a lot. This has just been a historically bad year on defense. They've given up 468 points. It's the second most in franchise history. They're going to have a new defensive coordinator. So I can't really say that there's been a whole lot of positives on defense. So, again, it's about the future. It's about the draft picks and the tap room. That's what you have to go on if you're a Jet fan.
Rich Cimini is our guest. Rich, the fact that the Jets don't have a single interception through 16 games, one, how is that possible? And two, how responsible is the head coach? How responsible was Steve Wilkes? How responsible are the players? What do you attribute a stat that, quite frankly, I think we might be, we may never see any team ever break that record for no picks in a full season?
Well, they've been counting interceptions since 1933, and so no team until now has gone this long, and the Jets, quite likely are going to be the first team to take an O for an entire season. I looked this up yesterday. In the NFL this year, an interception is thrown every 29 pass attempts, and the Jets have faced probably close to 500 pass attempts. To not intercept a single pass is utterly mind-boggling. And when you ask the coaches and players about it, they'll kind of almost dismiss it as some sort of bad luck, as if the football gods are against the Jets. And that is not true at all. I mean, there might be a little bit of luck involved, but this is based on personnel, and it's based on scheme. And when you go the entire year with an offer, it's a stinging indictment of your personnel and your scheme. I mean, don't talk to me about luck and how bizarre it is and how fluky it is, and interceptions come in bunches. I laugh when coaches say that. Well, they don't come in bunches for teams that do not have playmakers and do not have coaches who could put the players in the right position to make plays.
Rich, if you could wave your magic wand, what would be like the 2 or 3 changes you would make for next year?
You mean personnel-wise or just overall type changes?
Yeah,
I got to get a quarterback. I got to get a quarterback. I would do whatever I can. I'm assuming the Jets are going to be picking 3rd. That's the way it looks right now. We're basing that on if the Giants lose today. Just an FYI, the Jets cannot win a strength of schedule tiebreaker with the Giants. So if they end up with the same record, the Jets are not going to leapfrog into the number 2 spot unless the Giants win a football game today. So I would do whatever I can to get Mendoza. Chances are it's not going to happen because the Raiders will probably take him at 1. I would try to get Dante Moore at 2 to trade up and do whatever it takes to get him. I would sign 2 veteran quarterbacks. That way I have a 3-quarterback room for next year. That would be one thing. I would go out and hire an experienced offensive coach who can come in with a quarterback background, who can help the development of the quarterback, whoever it is. Because right now, Tanner Engstrand, they didn't have a great year on offense. Engstrand is relatively inexperienced still. I want a quarterback whisperer on that side of the ball. If I were Woody Johnson, I would demand that of Aaron Glenn. Find a quarterback coach. So those would be my 2 magic wand moments. And, of course, get a defensive coordinator, but we all know they have to do that. If I were Glenn, I would think about myself calling plays, but I would try to get one of those big-name defensive coordinators. I mentioned Wink Martindale in my notes today. I think he's a guy to watch out for. I think there's, when I first heard it, I kind of scoffed. I didn't think that would be a personality fit for the Jets, but he does have a lot of the same philosophies as Glenn, so I would keep an eye on that name for sure.
Rich Cimini is our guest, host of Flight Deck, ESPN Jets reporter. So all signs point to the head coach, of course, being retained. But, Rich, what can you point to through the first year that Aaron Glenn actually does well as a head coach? Because all the arguments for keeping him is simply who would come here, or it's only been 1 year. But I haven't seen anyone actually make a football case why he should stay. So I'm curious, being around him and covering this team up close, your thoughts on what Aaron Glenn does do well as a head coach.
Well, I would throw out the last 4 weeks. Anybody with even a small knowledge of football can see what's going on here. I mean, the Jets are just really not. Call it tanking, call it evaluating, call it whatever you want. They're playing a third-string rookie undrafted quarterback the last 4 weeks when they easily could have been playing Tyrod Taylor, who would have given them a better chance to win games. So I think it's pretty apparent what the Jets are doing there. They're playing some guys, who normally wouldn't play. So I think it's pretty apparent at 0-7 on November 4th when they traded Sauce Gardner and Quentin Williams, the entire season shifted and they moved into 2026 mode. So I think it's really unfair to evaluate Aaron Glenn based on what's happened over the last month or two, because even though he will say publicly what he has to say, we're trying to win these games, I think if they've put this year aside to try to build for the future. So I think it's just really unfair to evaluate the guy based on a lot of the decisions they made this year were based on the future. No, look, you look
started
at the
0-7
stats, you
though.
look at the rec. Yeah, that would be more concerning to me than anything that's happened over the last 4 weeks with all these blowouts. Look, I still think he has the potential to be a good coach. I think the locker room is behind him. I don't get the sense that there's any dissension. I've seen some people compare this to the Kotite era. I was there for the Kotite era. That was a clown show. I mean, that was guys laughing at the coach behind his back in the locker room. Believe me, I saw it happen. There's been none of that this year. So I get the sense that the locker room is still behind Aaron Glenn. So I think he's created that. I think he's created a vision of what they want to be on offense in terms of a physical smash mouth team. So I think there are very small, subtle signs that he knows what he's doing. Now, there isn't a lot of evidence. I grant you that. There just isn't a lot of evidence. But to fire a guy, they moved the goalposts on. The goalposts moved on November 4th when they made those trades. I mean, everything changed. So I think it would be completely unfair of Woody Johnson and the Johnson family to, dump a guy after basically moving the goalposts on him halfway through the season.
Yeah, no, I said something similar, which is, look, do you wish they win a few more games? Of course, but at the end of the day, like in year one, like winning 3, 4, 5, 6 games doesn't matter, and I think the Jets will be well served to have more picks, more cap room, and less wins in year one than the inverse, even though it's obviously painful to watch. And your point about like the Kotite thing is interesting. My first year at the Jets was 97. That was the year after Kotite was there, and there was like the residue of like just like getting fundamental processes in place, which I know Aaron Glenn is doing. And again, that's not going to make headlines. That's not going to be sexy at all. But I do think knowing Aaron, like what's important to him and the discipline and the accountability, those are foundational things that are in place. Now, some of the choices he made with the staff weren't good enough, and that would be a concern. But I think, again, knowing him, I think you'll see a better process in how he hires his staff moving forward.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, Mike, and you're right about it, Steve Wilkes obviously was a mistake. So Glenn has to wear that. Justin Fields was a mistake. Glenn is going to have to wear that, and Woody Johnson's going to have to pay for that because they still owe him $10 million, and he, in all likelihood, won't be back. So those are two pretty big mistakes. Tanner Engstrand on offense, I think he'll survive this, but obviously he didn't distinguish himself this year. I had a stat in my notes this morning that I think is truly mind-boggling, among many mind-boggling stats. First halves of games this year, the Jets have, I think, 760 yards passing in 16 games. How is that even possible? That is the lowest first-half passing yardage in at least the last 25 years of the NFL. So I think that speaks to just a lack of cohesion in the passing attack and just the plan at quarterback and everything. But I agree with you, Mike. I think it's one of the few things maybe we agree on. I think I kind of laughed, like the people a month ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, who's saying that the Jets should tank and that they should play Brady Cook, because why would you play anybody else? You just want to tank and get a look at the young kid, are now the same people who are saying that Glenn should be out of a job. So it's like, well, which way do you want it? That's what he's doing. He's playing for 2026, and he's giving this quarterback a chance to show what he can and can't do. And I think they have a pretty good idea of what he can and can't do now after 4 starts. But So yeah, this season was a disaster for the Jets. Probably not a lot of positives you can pull out of it, but I think the coach is entitled to another year to at least get the chance to execute his plan.
So, Rich, where I think I struggle the most is that when you look at the 0-7 start, and then they make the trades, and they won 3 of 5, and we were giving credit on this show saying, hey, they're playing hard for them. I don't care about draft positioning. They have all these picks now. If they got to move up, I want to see improvement. I want to see progress, and we were getting that. And then the month of December, I understand that they're not doing everything in their power to win, but starting with that Dolphins game down 21-0 in the first quarter, I think every Jet fan is just looking at what we're seeing. I think there's an expectation, hey, maybe don't be the worst team in NFL history in the month of December. Like, again, he's coming back, and I understand that, but there's nothing we could actually grasp onto that says this is the guy you want, making the quarterback pick and hiring a staff around that QB to put him in the best position to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bad month, but I didn't think it would be a great month. I mean, the minute they went to Brady Cook, and I hate to keep dumping on Brady Cook, he's a great kid, and the players really like him. But I mean, that just tells you everything about what you needed to expect for the last month of the season. I mean, they're playing with guys in the secondary who are probably like 4th and 5th string players at cornerback. So I don't know what you expected, Jake, in this last month of the season. Now, granted, it was the worst December in history in terms of point differential, and the defensive coordinator paid with his job, which I thought was the right move. At least it showed some accountability. And you're right, the 0-7, they were at least competitive in the 0-7 start, except for the Buffalo game, and I guess the Dallas game too, probably. And there's not a lot. If you're looking to grasp onto stuff, if you're a Jet fan, I told you at the top of this what to grasp onto: draft picks and the cap room. That's what you got to do. I think the Jets would admit, privately, that they miscalculated on the talent of this team going into the season, because they did not expect this to be a total rebuild going into the year. And I think their eyes were opened by that 0-7 start, and I think they came to the realization, like, look, we're not going anywhere this year. Let's just tear it down and start building for the future, which is exactly what they did. So I would say give Aaron Glenn another chance. Give him a quarterback. I mean, can the guy get a quarterback? Justin Fields was historically bad this year, and I question the wisdom of that decision way back when they signed him in March, and sure enough, it turned out to be a bad decision. I would like to see what Aaron Glenn can do with a competent quarterback. He had a true evaluation of his coaching ability.
Yeah, because like I had mentioned earlier, Rich, like along those lines, like if the Jets had won, let's say, 6 games, then the feedback would be like, oh, we should have torn it down to the studs. We're going to be average again. We're in the middle. So I do like the fact that, like, they're sort of, like, all in on this rebuild. Now, like, to me, the name that we're going to be talking about just to move this conversation forward is Malik Willis, because we'll see what happens today, but it's unlikely they'll get Mendoza. We'll see what happens with Dante Moore. But, like, to me, Malik Willis has played really good football. I think he can come in and be a good starter. I'm with you. I would sign 2 veterans that are durable. I like what the Giants did last year when they added Wilson and Winston. I would do something very similar if I was the Jets. I would try to sign Malik Willis and another durable, veteran quarterback, and then, try to draft the best quarterback possible.
Yeah, I'd sign up for that plan, because I don't think Darren Mucci is going to go into the draft with a glaring hole at quarterback. He's not going to leave himself vulnerable to other teams trying to extort more out of him to trade up. So any good GM would be going to the draft with all his bases covered and not dealing from a position of weakness. No, they may be very well trying to trade up for a back, but at least they could say, hey, we have 2 guys on our depth chart that we feel comfortable with going into the season if we have to. And I'm going to go out. I do think they will absolutely draft a quarterback. Now, it may not be in the first round with a big, sexy name. It may not be until the 4th round, but I can guarantee they will get a quarterback in the pipeline this year, someone they could develop for the next year and get an evaluation of him, and then make a decision in 27 if we have to take the big quarterback splurge at the top of the draft.
Rich, thanks for being my therapist during the season. Always love when we can get you on every week, so thanks so much for coming on to your game day.
All right, guys. Been a pleasure all year. Enjoy the playoffs.
Previous segment, 800-919-3776. Let's get right to your call. Say hello to Brian in Manhattan, who's first up this segment on New York Game Day. What's up, Brian? Thanks for making the call.
Hey, guys. Thanks for making my workout at the gym all the more interesting. Mike, I have lots of respect for you, what you've done in your career. I find it absolutely incredulous that you will continue to carry the water for Aaron Glenn and the New York Jets and try to put this positive spin. I think Jake brought the receipts. I think Jake consistently brings the receipts. And the idea that Glenn is doing a good job or that the Jets are moving in the right direction is patently absurd.
Brian, appreciate the call. Mike, of course, give you a fair chance to respond to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments. Look, Aaron Glenn's going to have a lot to prove next year, and we'll see how it goes. All my point is, there's been so much criticism about the organization and ownership and instability. This is like the opposite approach. This is a team that has brought it down to the studs. Do I wish they won a couple more games? Yeah, of course. But again, when you look at what they're playing with, I don't know what the expectations were in terms of the one-loss record. And the other thing I give Aaron Glenn a lot of respect for is he didn't indiscriminately say, I hired this coach or that coach, and I'm going to, just stand on my decision. He obviously, in a very public way, admitted that he was wrong hiring Steve Wilkes. I don't know what else you would want from him relative to if he didn't fire him, we'd be saying, how come he's not holding his coaches accountable? So I don't think I'm carrying the water. I'm just giving you the perspective of someone that's been there through thick and thin with a number of organizations. And I do know Aaron Glenn. I think he will do a good job long term. And I think now this is the time to be patient and see what happens when there's a lot of changes next year. And that obviously starts with the defensive coordinator. It starts with the quarterback. My expectation is it'll be a lot better. And again, the inverse is to say, you're going to fire Aaron Glenn, and then the conversation would be who would want to come here? Why would somebody want to come here and make any long-term decision? Because when Aaron Glenn traded Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, the expectation was that he would have a chance to build it the right way. So that's why, to me, right now, albeit painful, being patient and taking the long view is the appropriate one.
Let's say hello to Lee on Long Island, who's up next on New York Game Day. Hello, Lee.
Hey, Jake. I just want to know how are you doing, because I assume after listening to Rich Cimini you have an aneurysm because your head had to have exploded.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough because, again, I understand that they're not going to make a change, but if Woody Johnson wanted to be a proactive owner in this case, he would have every right, in my opinion.
No, but if he's going to be proactive, he's trying to get as many draft choices for the future. I totally see that differently. The criticism for a decade is that he was impetuous. He wasn't giving the team.
But he hasn't been with coaches. This would be the first time he would be.
No, but they've never taken the long-term view. They've band-aided. They fired a head coach. They kept a GM. They've went out and signed Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, but if the coach is not any good and you know that, why would you let him pick the quarterback?
But how do you know he's not any good?
Because there's no evidence that he is any good, Mike. You can't point to anything he's done well as a head coach. That's the big problem.
Jake, that's not true. You're just basing it on a very small sample set of playing with a roster.
What does he do well as a head coach, though, Mike?
Wait. Hold on a second here. He's won 3 games. We know that's not good enough. But, again, once he's out there with Brady Cook, where I give them credit is they're not doing the easy thing. They're doing the hard thing, because if they wanted to, they could have gone back out and signed another retread quarterback. They're playing with a quarterback that may not be in the NFL
But Tyrod's healthy, so they could play him, and they still were losing games with him. And they started 0-7 with Justin Fields.
But Tyrod hasn't been healthy.
He's been healthy. He's healthy today. He was healthy last game.
Right, and right.
So Brady Cook started 2 starts.
Right. So let me ask you this. So let's say Tyrod Taylor started 2 of the last 3, whatever it is.
They still lose.
You don't know that. And
Mike, they just hit the point differential for the worst month in December. What type of difference was Tyrod going to make with the defense that's this historically bad?
Because if you make some first downs, the best way to hide a bad defense is to keep them on the sideline. But anyway, regardless of that, all my point is fundamentally is if they won 1 or 2 more games this year and we're sitting here and they're 5-12, that's not going to matter in 2 years. What does matter is getting the culture right, getting foundational pieces like offensive linemen, Garrett Wilson, hopefully 2 pass rushers.
Which they inherited. They had that. They added Armand Membu to it. They inherited Olu Fashanu. They inherited Joe Tippmann. What have they done to add to this team that should give any Jet fan confidence? The free agent signings have been an unmitigated disaster, not just Justin Fields, but Andre Sisco. Brandon Stevens has not had a good year, paid $36 million. Like, again, I want this to work. I'm a Jet fan who lives and dies with the team. I spend 4 hours a day on my Jet podcast talking about them. But there's nothing we could grab onto that says he's a good coach. So if they acted and moved on, it would be justified. That's the whole point. They're not going to, but why aren't the Jets the Titans with Brian Callahan a year from now, or Eberflus in Chicago? Why aren't the Jets what happened with what's his name, Freddie Kitchens with Baker Mayfield, or Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and Nathaniel Hackett? Like these are the type of years we're talking about. If you just look at everything we've seen,
right? Or it could be Bill Parcells and Dan Campbell. Like,
so we're betting on outliers.
No, we're not betting on it. But again, like, this is the one time to me that the record is somewhat irrelevant. When you're eliminated, like, the worst place you want to be is picking somewhere in the middle. Like, as painful as it is, being really, really bad could be the best thing that happened to this franchise, hopefully for the next decade, because they wound up coming out on it on the other end with much better players. And again, having 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years is a really good place to be. Now, I think they've earned the right to execute this plan and not stop it halfway through.
Here's what we'll do, because I apologize, because Lee and I, we went to Lee. We didn't let him give him a chance to make his point, because Mike T and I are debating the state of the Jets right now. So, Lee on Long Island, you get the last word this hour. We apologize for cutting you off.
No, it's okay. I appreciate it. But I just, when Rich Cimini's talking, he's saying we can't judge Aaron Glenn on the last 5 games of the season, but we also can't judge him on the first 7 games of the season, which is insane. We see that he can't develop players because so many players regressed under him that were established. We see he brings in a quarterback who is a fifth-year veteran, and he is the worst year of his career under Aaron Glenn. So Aaron Glenn has to bring in an offensive coordinator. He has to bring in an offensive mind that can be a quarterback whisperer. He has to bring in a defensive guy to run the defense. What does Aaron Glenn do if he has to bring in 10 different coaches to run the team and he can't develop players and he doesn't even keep the locker room cohesive because he's speaking out of one side of his mouth one day and then out of the other side the other day when the players have blowback? What has Aaron Glenn done at all other than not get a field goal blocked? The truth of the matter is, if they didn't have 3 fluky games of special teams plays that won them the games, they would be a winless season right now. Like, it took special teams fluke plays to win games. That's unsustainable. He has done nothing well this year. Back to you guys. Thank you.
Lee, we appreciate it. We're up against it, so we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll get to more of your calls, go around the league as well. He's Mike Tannenbaum. My name is Jake Asman. You're listening to New York Game Day. 1 hour to go right here on 880 ESPN New York and the ESPN New York app.